Hello, this is Astrologer Coach Sonja Francis, and today we're going to be talking about the next new moon, which will come up on October 16th at 3:31 p.m. East Coast time in the US, which is also New York time, which is also 8:31 p.m. London time. And this will be exact at almost 24 degrees of Libra. So, of course, a new moon always starts a new moon cycle. And so that's a 28-day period in which we're trying to connect with a new energy. The new moons are usually an introverted time when we go within, right around the time of the new moon, just to see what we would like to align ourselves with for the next 28 days. So setting new moon intentions can be a really helpful practice in connection with the new moon energies. And for those of you who would like to do that, I will talk about this process towards the end of the video, and I will give you the very best and most potent times for doing your new moon intentions. So stay tuned for that. Also, take advantage of the timestamps that I have added to the description part of this video, like I do with all my videos right now. In case you want to watch this video in shorter sequences, or you want to skip over a part, go to a later part in the video, or go back and forth, all of that is available with the timestamps. Now, this new moon is also a supermoon, and so those occur when the moon becomes either full or new while it's at its closest distance to the Earth, and therefore the moon becomes more powerful, and so that's why it's called a supermoon. And this is the second of 3 super new moons in a row. The last one was the super new moon in Virgo, and the next one will be the super new moon in Scorpio in November. And they generate greater gravitational and electromagnetic forces, and therefore they increase the effects on our physical, mental, and emotional bodies and our well-being. And so this also facilitates that we can also get a chance to have some greater consciousness shifts as well, if we choose to use it in that way. Now, with the new moon in harmony, loving, balance-seeking Libra, we tend to be more focused, or we're invited at least, to focus on win-win situations with other people, fair exchanges, equal connections, harmonious relationships, but also a harmonious engagement in terms of our general environment, and maybe also with ourselves, depending on where this shows up in your chart. And with this new moon chart, though, there is something we have to mention, which is we have 3 oppositions in this new moon chart, and we have a T-square. Because of that, we might have challenges, really connecting to this new moon in this particular way, like I just mentioned. Now, the focus point of the T-square is the Jupiter-Pluto-Saturn lineup in Capricorn, which is very strong right now. And that indicates that we're experiencing some stress or challenges around our long-term goals, our obligations out there in society or in the world, and also in connection with our social structures or limitations in general that we're currently experiencing, socially speaking. So since there are plenty of challenging aspects in this super new moon chart, that might keep us a little bit off balance, even though we're looking for balance. And then there's also, of course, the Pluto and Mercury station phases that are still both very intensified at the time of this new moon. Mercury in Scorpio has just gone retrograde on October 13th, a couple of days before the new moon becomes exact. And then, of course, Mars in Aries is still retrograde until November 13th. So when you have these retrograde planets in a new moon chart, there's a lot of internal stuff also that goes on that needs to be looked at. And so we're doing a lot of internal work yet again. Now, more about all those details, I will get more into it in a moment. I just want to very quickly mention that in my latest webinar that I recorded on October 4th, we discussed the Mercury station and retrograde phases in Scorpio and how that is connected to the Pluto station in Capricorn, and how all of that looks in relationship with your own birth chart or with our own birth charts in general. So if you want to know how these planetary stations are impacting you personally right now, because right now that's what's happening, then feel free to click on the link below this video and add the Mercury retrograde in Scorpio Libra webinar to your cart. Okay, so now let's get back to the new moon and specifically the Libra component of this new moon chart, because of course that's what the new moon is all about. So of course with Libra, there's we're really focusing on relationships, and in particular one-on-one relationships. But all relationships really begin with our relationship to ourselves. Everything out there, or every relationship that we're engaging in, is a reflection of something that's inside of us, or at least that there's like a resonance that we're feeling with something inside of us. So ideally speaking, interacting with another person is a co-creative, equal exchange where we're trying to connect to things inside of ourselves through another person that can help us create something even more beautiful than what we could do on our own. And the thing is, though, ideally speaking, right? Now, the reality of it is that sometimes, we don't experience that in exactly that way, depending on how centered we are within ourselves, how tuned in we are with each other, with the other that we're collaborating with. And also, how are we responding to the rhythm of life together, right? So here's some useful questions that you can ask yourself for this new moon cycle. What does an equal relationship look like to me? And what does that mean even, right? Like we have to kind of get more of a sense of how do I see that? What's my perception of that? And then where is the balancing point? Where's the balancing point within a one-on-one relationship? Where's the balancing point within myself? Where's the balancing point when it comes to my environment and me inside that environment, right? So feel free to really investigate these questions and just allow yourself to either journal or meditate with them. You don't have to necessarily have the right answer to any of these questions, but it is important to sort of like allow yourself to have an open-minded, curious process with these questions, because it helps you to be more in alignment with the new moon energies. Now, another question you can ask here is, what comes up for me when I hear the phrase, the art of relationship? The art of relationship. And I think that's a really beautiful expression. How do you relate to that expression? And what shows up? Again, feel free to journal on that or meditate on that. Now, Libra is the 7th sign of the zodiac. So Libra represents a major turning point because it invites us to investigate ourselves through the lens of the other, right? Somebody else out there. So by relating on a one-on-one level with somebody else. So anything we haven't mastered from the 6 signs that come before Libra, we bring that to all of our relationships. So anything that comes between Aries and Virgo, right? Aries, Taurus, Gemini, Cancer, Leo, and Virgo. Those are the signs that come before Libra. And any of those things that we haven't really learned about ourselves or connected to in a healthy way in those signs in our chart, that is the stuff that will then show up in our relationships. Because we're attracting people who mirror back to us our relationship that we have with ourselves. And the first 6 signs of the zodiac is sort of like that's how we learn how we relate to ourselves. So Libra invites us to see all of our issues, resolve them, and become more whole, or have more of a ability to connect to the parts of ourselves that we haven't yet been able to connect with consciously. So ask yourself, what if harmony and peace were mine to create within me first? Because obviously, with Libra, we do seek very often, we seek harmony and peace. We seek to have this connection with other people that feels harmonious and peaceful. But in order to have that, right, if our relationship to ourselves is the one that dictates what types of relationships we are attracting to ourselves, then that would indicate that we first have to find that harmony, that peace with ourselves, with all the things that make us who we are. We have to find a sort of like a connection to that first in order to have that also in the outside world with other people. So the Libra energy really encourages us to see both sides of a situation and to find the middle path. Or better yet, you could also say to find sort of like a win-win, because we see what's going on over there, we see what's going on over there, and we're trying to bring those two sides together and make them work in a way that is a win-win, or that is sort of like a helpful collaboration or a healthy collaboration. So if we are to reconcile opposite energies, we need to seek the highest and best outcome for everyone involved. Right? In other words, we need to see everyone as equally deserving, and that includes ourselves. Because sometimes with Libra, we're so focused on the other person that we forget that we are a part of that collaboration, that we are a part of that relationship, and that we deserve the equality just as much as the other person deserves it. So ask yourself here, what does treating others fairly mean to me? How do I relate to that expression, or how do I relate to hearing that? What do I do when I want to treat other people fairly? And what does being treated fairly mean to me? So when it comes to myself, when it comes to how I want to be treated, right? What does that mean? Again, feel free to journal on those things and see what shows up in terms of like what you've experienced in the past, what you remember about one-on-one relationships in relationship to, treating others fairly or being treated fairly. What would you like it to be? What would you like it to look like? What actions would you like to take around that? So you can kind of journal on all of that. Now, if you could envision the ideal relationship, what would that look like? Right? If I could envision the ideal relationship, what would that look like to me? And of course, ideal relationships don't necessarily exist, right? I mean, what we think is like the exact ideal relationship that we need to have doesn't necessarily exist, because of course we're all human beings and we all have our limitations and flaws and idiosyncrasies. And, our personalities that we grew up with or grew into, through our childhood and through our experiences. So obviously there is no such thing as an ideal relationship. But if there were, what would that look like for me? And could I give myself permission to drop my expectations and my shoulds around relationships just for right now? And this is a very powerful question, especially with this new moon, and you'll see in a moment why. Because this shoulding on ourselves, it puts a lot of pressure on ourselves, and it's unnecessary pressure because, everyone is what they are. And we don't really have influence over that. We have no influence over who another person is. We really only have influence of how we kind of relate to that and how we respond to how another person is. And so we need to give ourselves permission to kind of drop our expectations a little bit, because when we have these high expectations of ourselves and other people, it just ends up disappointing us. So feel free to sit with this question, and see how that shows up for you, especially in the next 28 days as well. Now, some other questions you can ask here too is, what might be a first step towards relationships that honor both parties equally? And this is something we can ask ourselves when it comes to our own personal relationships. We can ask ourselves that in our business endeavors or business relationships, especially one-on-one relationships. But we can also ask us this question in relationship to, how do we see that, or how do we want that to unfold in the world, And of course, if we want to see that in the world, how do I take that first step? How do I begin in making that happen? Now, how might honoring myself contribute to that? How might honoring myself contribute to having relationships where both parties are equally honored? So, because sometimes we think of it more as like a thing that we're doing for the other person, but if we don't include ourselves in that correlation, then of course there's a piece missing, right? So we always have to make sure that we include ourselves within that relationship. Because equality, of course, only can happen when we include ourselves. Now, what might be possible if I gave myself permission to approve of myself right here, right now, and for no particular reason, just because? And this is a great Libra question, because for those of you who have strong Libra in your birth chart, you will understand this question very well. Because with Libra, there is this part of us where we want others to approve of us, where we want to have this harmonious connection, and this harmonious connection happens when other people approve of us, right? So if you do have a lot of Libra in your chart, you will definitely understand this. So feel free to really use this question for the next 28 days in particular. What might be possible if I gave myself permission to approve of myself right here, right now, and for no particular reason, just because I am who I am, just because I do what I do, just because, I'm human. Okay, so these are some really great questions that you can move with and connect with in the next 28 days. And if you want to have access to the new moon questions from this video, because there's going to be a bunch more after this, in writing, and also if you want to have access to the members full moon video every month, feel free to check out the various levels of membership that are available on my website right now at astrologercoach.com. And if you're already a member, check your membership portal by signing into your account, and you will find all my posts inside the My Content tab. And then that way you can just click on each of the posts and you'll get to that Super New Moon in Libra article. And that article will have all of the new moon questions in writing. And it will be available by October 12th, the very latest. Okay, so just remember that. And also remember to work with the coaching questions once the super new moon has become exact. So you don't want to do it before October 16th. You want to start working with all of these questions after October 16th, if that makes sense. Okay. All right, so let's talk a little bit about some of the other aspects of this new moon chart, because of course the aspects of this new moon chart are very particular to that particular new moon. The Libra component that is pretty much connected to all new moons in Libra, but the aspects that are happening this year in the new moon chart are very particular to only these next 28 days. Now, the new moon opposes Mars in Aries, and Mars in Aries is also retrograde at the time of the new moon. And we'll talk about that in a little bit in more detail as well. But the new moon opposes Mars and then squares the Jupiter-Pluto-Saturn lineup in Capricorn. And this creates a T-square, as I already mentioned at the very beginning, right? Now, this T-square invites us to check in with our motivations and ambitions around long-term goals. Also, we're feeling pulled between our personal desires, which is connected to Mars in Aries, our one-on-one personal and business relationships, which is connected to the new moon in Libra, and our long-term aspirations and our social aspirations, which is connected to that Jupiter-Pluto-Saturn lineup in Capricorn. Now, with this T-square, doing what's right out there in the world is important to us at this time, but it may not always be in alignment with what we truly want for ourselves, and the internal tension that gets created because of that could really lead to conflict. So you want to ask yourself here with this T-square, if the world needed something from me, what might that be right now? And what might be possible if I met people, other people, halfway? What might be possible? And what if it were possible for me to take responsibility for my interactions with others without guilt, without too much pressure on my part? And are there any rigid attitudes or limitations on my part that might be interfering with my ability to connect with other people at this time? So this is something, of course, we want to be honest with ourselves around these things. It's so much easier sometimes to spot this type of behavior with others or out there in the world, but it's not always so easy to see it with ourselves. But it's so important that we do, because when we don't own that, and if we don't realistically connect to our own rigid attitudes or limitations, we tend to keep projecting that stuff out into the world, out onto other people, and that creates a lot of suffering. And so suffering, for ourselves, and for others too. So how can I stay true to myself while taking other people's needs and limitations into account? That's another good question, right? And what if I balanced and integrated my inner masculine and feminine? My inner masculine, my inner feminine. And the reason why we want to ask that question is because Libra is very concerned with balance of the masculine and the feminine. We want to create an equal relationship between our own inner masculine and feminine. And if that's out of whack, if that's out of balance, then that creates a lot of issues in the world as well, and in our relationships as well with other people. So what if I balanced and integrated my inner masculine and inner feminine? And also feel free to journal on what that even means to you. What does it mean, your inner masculine, your inner feminine? Like, really feel free to dig deeper into that. And of course, Mercury in Scorpio is going to help you with that digging deeper into some stuff. Now, with so many planets in cardinal signs, because we have Aries, we have Libra, we have lots of Capricorn. So these are all cardinal signs. So with so many planets in cardinal signs, we might feel overly active, or we might feel we want to initiate a lot of stuff and get going with a lot of stuff. And so this could really keep us busy, for sure. In fact, we could end up burdened with pressure. We could also feel burdened with commitments and obligations. So as best as you can, and as best as you can is always something I say, because you don't want to, again, put more pressure on yourself. So whatever is possible at this time in space and in this body that you're currently in, avoid shooting on yourself for the next 28 days. And when I say shoulding, it's really this, like, I should be here, or I should be doing this, or this person should be connecting with me in this particular way. Just avoid shooting on yourself, and maybe also on other people, but in particular on yourself, because that's where the pressure gets created when we should on ourselves. So take the pressure off, and perhaps say to yourself, I'm doing the best I can, and by definition, that's the best I can do. Right? So if you find that you are pushing yourself too hard, you might want to ask yourself, when is enough enough? And could I allow myself a break before I break myself in some way, whether that's emotionally, physically, mentally, spiritually? Might such a break mean I come back stronger if I take that break? And might that actually be efficient in the long run if I take some breaks? And breaks don't have to be long breaks either. It can be shorter breaks, sometimes longer breaks, depending on what's possible. And could I test that quickly, just as an experiment? So just see what that feels like when you take a break. And how does your body respond? How does your emotional body respond? How does your mental body respond to breaks? Just experiment with that a little bit. Now, given that the empty leg of this T-square lands in Cancer, the solution of this stressful aspect lies in our ability to self-nurture. So we are invited here to pay attention to our basic emotional human needs. What do I need as a human being just to feel okay in the world? There's a need for love and acceptance that we all share as human beings. There's a need for control, or you could also say, not wanting to be out of control, right? As human beings, we do not like to feel out of control. There's a need for safety and security because we don't like to feel unsafe or unsecure. And then we're also reminded to nurture our feeling body and to be open to receiving support from familiar, trusted people as best as we can, of course, right? If that's available to us. So ask yourself, how might a commitment to my emotional well-being support me with my long-term goals and my relationships, including the one to myself? And that question right there encapsulates that T-square. How do we deal with that T-square the best way possible for the next 28 days? And then you can also ask yourself, just for this moment, just for right now, could I focus on nurturing myself? Might nurturing myself help me step outside of my comfort zone with more ease? And if so, what modest daily practice might best provide that nurturing? And again, these are questions that you can really just pay attention to, the subtle things that make you feel nurtured. Where you feel this sense of I'm good. This feels good, right? That's when we feel nurtured. Or also what I mentioned earlier, with feeling safe, with feeling like we're not out of control, with feeling love and acceptance. So what modest daily practice might best provide that nurturing? That's really the key question, because we also have Venus in Virgo, of course, with this new moon chart. So we really need to pay attention to those daily practices. Now, with this in mind, I want to invite anyone who needs emotional, spiritual, or mental support right now to do a coaching healing session with me. They're very powerful and they're very gentle at the same time, and they allow you to let go of any stress or uncomfortable feelings, and they really provide a chance to reconnect with this inner peace and the inner calm that is always available to us underneath all of the turmoil and all of that stress. So if that sounds appealing, feel free to reach out. I'm also offering a substantial discount for the next three session coaching healing packages until October 25th at midnight Eastern Time. The regular price for the 3 sessions would come to $471, but for the next 2 weeks or until October 25th, I will offer 3 of these packages for only $387. That's basically $129 per session instead of $157 per session. And then as a bonus for the first 3 people who take advantage of that package, you will also get the Mercury Retrograde webinar that I mentioned earlier for free. Okay, so if this is a gift that you want to give to yourself, please email me right away. You can either email me at sonja@astrologercoach.com or info@astrologercoach.com. And, just remember also that these sessions can really make a huge difference in your life. This is not just something you're doing to relieve stress, but this could have a long-term impact as well. And I also have a couple of testimonials from people who have done coaching healing sessions with me below this video. And I want you to really take a look at those testimonials, not to brag, but to simply help you see how powerful these sessions are. So feel free to check out those testimonials, all right? Now, to get back to the super new moon chart, there's a couple of more aspects that I want to talk about. Now, the new moon in Libra also trines the north node in Gemini. Now, the north node, of course, represents our collective soul journey right now. So this trine represents that balance and equality can be achieved in our relationships if we stay open-minded and bring a good dose of curiosity to any interactions we have with other people right now. So what you can ask yourself here is, what questions could I ask myself or someone else that would help me create a win-win scenario? And this is really a great question to use when you're experiencing stress or stressful interactions with other people, when you're experiencing sort of like some kind of conflict with another person. You really want to ask yourself, what questions right now could I ask myself or somebody else that would help me create a win-win scenario here? And this is really, I want to invite you to really use this question as much as possible if you can, especially if you're experiencing conflict or stress. Now, we also have 3 oppositions in this new moon chart, and oppositions often get played out in our relationships with others. So let's take a look at these 3 oppositions. The new moon opposes retrograde Mars in its own sign, right, which is Aries. We already talked about that a little bit in connection with that T-square. And that's a really big deal. It's a really big deal, first of all, because Mars is retrograde, so it has more of an internal strength inside of us. So this indicates that we feel easily agitated with others, but we may also not be able to express our feelings directly because this is a retrograde planet. And that could lead to some passive-aggressive behaviors possibly, or at the very least, a retreat within ourselves, not wanting to deal with others. And possibly maybe even just fuming internally, like having stuff come up internally. But at the very least, we want to just retreat and just not connect with other people. Now, this retreat into ourselves could give us a chance to re-examine our various one-on-one relationships. So you can ask yourself here, could I acknowledge what is getting stirred up inside of me when connecting with someone who is limited in their ability to have equal relationships? Because this might be something that might occur. So if something like that happens and something gets stirred up inside of you, feel free to ask yourself that question. Now, what if taking a compassionate approach towards myself and my own insecurities or triggers actually made for more fulfilling connections with other people? So this could be another kind of scenario that could show up, that we get triggered, that we feel kind of insecure about something. And how can we sort of have more of a compassionate approach when that happens? And how could that make a difference with our interactions, with our relationships? And then the last question you could ask here is, how might I balance my need for equal connection and harmony with my desire for self-fulfillment and complete independence? Because remember, with that Mars being retrograde at the time of the new moon, that feels very personal. That Mars in Aries is going to feel very personal wherever you have it in your birth chart. And so there is this sense of wanting complete independence and self-fulfillment. It feels we want to really connect to what we feel passionate about. But of course, we also have that new moon in Libra. So there's also that need for equal connection and harmony. So how might I balance my need for that equal connection and harmony with my desire for self-fulfillment and complete independence? Okay, now let's take a look at Venus, because of course Venus rules Libra, and it is the new moon in Libra. And so Venus is currently in Virgo, and Venus opposes Neptune in Pisces. It also makes a trine to Jupiter. We'll talk about that later. Let's stick with the oppositions first. Venus in Virgo opposes Neptune in Pisces. So this shows that we can choose to connect to others with compassion and forgiveness in our hearts. And the emphasis here is on choose. We can choose to do that. We don't have to, but we can choose it. Now, we're also ready to dissolve anything that we valued in the past that no longer serves either ourselves or humanity. So our relationships could also feel confusing or disappointing with this combination. Some of them might even be among those things that we want to dissolve. Not all of them by any means. But it certainly helps us to get more connected with our inner knowingness. We're getting the invitation to connect more to that intuitive place inside of us. That inner sense of, what feels right to us? What's the right next step in connection to how we feel, what we sense? So as best as you can, find your inner balance with what's real and what's not, and allow others to be human. Whatever limitations they may have, just allow them to be human. And ask yourself, could I allow myself to be both smart and decisive and open-hearted? Because Venus in Virgo likes to be smart and decisive. Neptune in Pisces, open-hearted. So how could I allow myself to be both? And what would honesty without judgment look like? And how might a compassionate heart support me in my decision-making process? Because we think of decision-making very much as something that's only connected to the mind, right? That's only connected to the rational mind. But I think in this combination, it's very important to also include the heart, to include compassion in our decision-making process as well. Doesn't mean solely and only, but use your mind, but also use a compassionate heart. And what is asking to be dissolved in our lives right now? What relationships, what situations, what values? Where are we being asked to dissolve certain things? And what is asking for forgiveness? Because with Venus opposite Neptune, there is a very strong sense that if we bring forgiveness to the table, that can really bring something to our interactions right now. So what is asking for forgiveness? And then some last questions you can ask here as well is, what is just or unjust? Because remember, we're dealing with Venus is connected to Libra. And Libra is very interested in what's just, what's fair. So what is just or unjust? Can I embrace all confusions or paradoxes? And could I let go of wanting to figure it all out just for right now? In particular, when it comes to what's fair. And so this is important. This last question is important because with Neptune being involved, we might feel a little confused at times, especially if we're not able to really have a lot of acceptance around certain issues or certain things that are occurring in our relationships right now. So if we're not able to have acceptance, we might feel confused, and we might see all these different paradoxical energies moving together. So can I embrace all confusions and all paradoxes? And could I let go of wanting to figure it all out just for right now? And that will also be helpful with this opposition. If confusion shows up, right? You might not feel that, but if it does, use that question. All right, so then Mercury in Scorpio opposes Uranus in Taurus. So that's the third opposition. They're both currently retrograde. Mercury is retrograde. Uranus has been retrograde for a while. And so this could create some sudden and unexpected insights that we're receiving, maybe through other people even. And we might feel nervous or anxious as well, because we might become aware of what's not working for us anymore. And there might also be an itch to move forward and realize a new vision for ourselves in our lives that's in alignment with our values in particular, and in connection with other people, to find like-minded people that share these values. It may well be true that something needs to change in our lives, but we must take care that we don't rush into anything, and that we don't paint a dark picture, because Mercury is in Scorpio. And so with Mercury in Scorpio, there might be a tendency towards worst case scenario thinking or painting a darker picture. So ask yourself, how is my day-to-day thinking being interrupted by divine interventions? Because Uranus can be that divine intervention, right? So how could that be interrupted? And what messages might those interventions have for me? So if something happens, and these divine interventions can show up in so many different ways. It could be that the computer crashes, right? For example, it could be that, somebody else all of a sudden changes something on you, or does something that's really out of character, So we could see these divine interventions in many, many ways. But what you really want to ask yourself is, when that happens, is what messages might those interventions have for me? And what needs more space in my life? We want to give something more space, because Uranus always asks us to give space to something. And so because it's in Taurus right now, of course, we want to give space when it comes to having different values from other people, from wanting different things, from having different preferences from other people. We want to give that some space. Now, how might thinking outside the box support my connections with other people right now? Having sort of this ability to see things in different ways. What needs a new approach in my communications or interactions with other people? And again, because both of these planets are retrograde, this might be an inner job right now that you need to really journal on it or meditate on it and have an inner process with all of that. Now, this question is really beautiful too. Might staying flexible when it comes to my intimate relationships or financial partnerships be beneficial to me right now? And I would say with you, whenever Uranus is involved, there's these unexpected things that happen or pop up or come up. So flexibility can really be helpful here, because when we're not flexible, when we get rigid, when we get fixed, and of course, Mercury is in a fixed sign, Uranus is in a fixed sign, so there might be a tendency for us to get fixed with this. But what if we could actually remain flexible when something unexpected happens in our intimate relationships, in our financial partnerships? So just see how that feels. And if something like that shows up in particular, remember that question. Now, how might staying calm in this uncertain climate support my sanity? And so, of course, with Uranus, there's all this, electricity that can move through us. We can feel really this uncertainty, this, feeling anxious a little bit can be part of that. But when we connect to something calm inside of us, through whatever way feels right to you. It could be through meditation, could be through walks in nature, it could be through just connecting to your own breathing and allowing yourself to really Let your breath calm you down, whatever works. How might staying calm in this uncertain climate support my sanity? And this is something we might really want to remember in the next 28 days after the new moon becomes exact. Now, Venus in Virgo also trines Jupiter in Capricorn, like I mentioned a moment ago. So we have a chance here to grow in our social and work relationships at this time. So ask yourself, what work connections might expand my horizons at this time? How might a more realistic view or perspective do the same? And where could practical collaborations create expansion or goodwill long term? Great question. You don't have to work with all the questions, I should say that too, right? Like, use whatever questions really resonate with you personally, and they might be different ones from the ones that resonate with me. So, I like all of them, of course, because I created all of those questions, but there are some questions that pop out at me sometimes where I'm like, ooh, yeah, this is a good one. So that might not necessarily be true for you, so feel free to ignore that. But you really use the questions in the way that works best for you, of course. Now, as I mentioned earlier, Pluto is still stationing. That means that energy is exalted at the time of this super new moon. And that means that we have been more aware of its impact on us. And this can sometimes cause discomfort with Pluto in particular. So rather than pushing into that discomfort and creating more of it, or pulling away from that discomfort and creating more ease, or wanting to create more ease, we are being asked to simply be with that energy, to be with that Plutonian energy that sometimes feels a little out of control. So we're invited to just hang out with it until the planet picks up speed again around October 24th. So I know this is quite a long time, but you want to kind of like notice what shows up, right? The station phase is there for us to create awareness, to see what shows up, what we actually want to pay attention to, and what we want to shift within ourselves. Now, to sum it all up for this super new moon, life sometimes forces us into dark and difficult experiences, like a lot of us have probably experienced this year in 2020 in particular. And so whenever this happens, we need to keep in mind that the gold in any such experiences lies with how we evolve as a result. So it's not about what is happening in the now moment. It's more about how do we move through this and how do we come out on the other end, right? Because Pluto is always a process, right? So because there's been such a strong Pluto influence this year, and then also with this new moon chart, we have to remember that it's a process. And as long as we can get through it and come out of it at the end even stronger, that's what we need to focus on. We don't want to focus on the things that are happening in the moment that cause us to go into dark places, that cause us to feel out of control, that cause us to feel super stretched. But to really focus on how is that going to actually make me better and stronger and evolve to that next soul level on my journey in this particular human body. So ask yourself, where do I experience major tests around integrity, around boundaries, around social propriety? So standards that are deemed socially acceptable or appropriate right now. Where do I need to take more responsibility in my life? Where do I need to draw the line and say enough is enough, right? We've had that question already before. And as best as you can, remember you're always accomplishing things and making progress. Always, even if it's not visible yet. It's like, when you watch a plant grow, like there's a seed And sometimes we don't see the results of that seed, even though we've been watering it and we've been, doing all this nurturing stuff to the seed. There's been sunshine and rain and everything, but the seed has somehow not yet popped through the earth. It's a little bit like that, right? So even if it's not yet visible, whatever work you've already done, whatever you've already put into making that seed come through, that is still happening. There's still progress, and there's still a process that's happening to that seed. Now, self-care is a very, very important component in this. In fact, without it, we can't accomplish much. We're always behind the 8 ball. And just like the seed needs nurturing, right, and needs care, we need care too. We ourselves, we need a lot of care in order to have stuff manifest and pop out there in the world. So ask yourself, what role does rest and recreation play in my ability to achieve my highest potential and in my playing a meaningful part in society? Because let's face it, we all right now need to play a meaningful part in society in whichever way. Some of us bigger, and some of us, maybe in more subtle ways. But we all need to take responsibility for what we're creating on a social level right now. So it's very important that we focus on self-care, because without that, it's very difficult to play a meaningful part out there in the world. So for the next 4 weeks, or for the next 28 days after the new moon becomes exact, do your best to seek empowering relationships without compromising your essential self, your values, and your future visions. And in turn, also empower other people to be themselves and to allow them to honor their differences. Because what we do for others, we also do for ourselves. And I have a really beautiful quote from a newsletter I received last week that I already shared on my Facebook page and on my Instagram page. But for those of you who haven't seen it yet, please feel free to read it on my website and share it with your friends and family if it resonates. You can simply go to my blog page at astrologercoach.com and look for astrology articles, and it will be inside the Super New Moon in Libra article at the bottom. So yeah, feel free to take a look at that. Now, if you have an ascendant or personal planets in 22 to 26 degrees of Libra, Aries, Capricorn, or Cancer, then of course this super new moon is definitely going to impact you more strongly than other people. But even if you don't have personal planets or points in those degrees and signs, take a look at your birth chart and just look to see where does 24 degrees of Libra land in your chart, because the house placement of the new moon will indicate which area of life is most impacted for you for the next 28 days. Now, if you don't know how to look that up, feel free to also check out my 30-minute class, How to Read My Birth Chart. You can get free access to that via my homepage at astrologercoach.com. Just scroll down on the homepage until you see free class, and you can just click on that window, and then you will get that 30-minute class to watch, and you can see how to connect that with your birth chart. Now, let's talk a little bit about setting intentions, because this is something a lot of you do during a new moon. It's something I do during a new moon. The new moon is the very best time to set some intentions for the coming moon cycle. And as always, it is best to set your intentions soon after the new moon becomes exact, not before, and definitely not during a moon void of course phase. So you want to wait until October 16th, depending on what time zone you're in. Actually, I will give you the best and most potent times in a second. You don't want to do the setting intentions during a moon void of course phase. So if you don't know when those moon void of course phases are, In my weekly forecasts, I always talk about, when the moon goes void, of course, each week at the very beginning of the weekly forecast, and that's available to the public. So feel free to take a look at that. So this month, with this new moon, the best and most potent time to set intentions would be between 3:31 p.m. and 6:11 p.m. on October 16th, or between 1:05 a.m., so like right after midnight on October 17th, until 3:31 p.m. on October 18th. And all of that is the New York time zone, East Coast time in Northern America. And if you live in a different time zone than US East Coast time, then feel free to join my Facebook fan page or follow me on Twitter. And I will be posting reminders on October 16th in the afternoon and on October 17th and 18th throughout the day to let you know when it is time to set your new moon intentions. Okay, so that's available, or you can just do the conversion yourself as well if you want to do that. Now, for more information about setting intentions, you can go to my website, to the blog page, and look for astrology articles, or for the tag New Moon Intentions. That's on the right-hand side of the blog page if you are on the computer. And if you don't have a computer and you can only look it up via your phone, I would say just click on the link below this video, because that will be easier, because on the phone it's a little bit more complicated. And to sign up for my free monthly newsletter, you can do that via my homepage at astrologercoach.com, or you can email us at info@astrologercoach.com and just write newsletter in the subject line. The newsletter gets sent out approximately once or twice a month. It has special offers, videos, announcements about courses or webinars or my business. So if you're interested in that, feel free to sign up for that. And then if you have any general questions about astrology or about the new moon, feel free to email me at info@astrologercoach.com. If you have any personal questions, however, that require of me to look at your birth chart, I will ask you to book a reading via my website at astrologercoach.com. Or if you have any questions connected to what's coming up within the next 30 to 40 days, join us for the next monthly forecasting forum on November 8th. You can always ask questions during the monthly forecasting forums that I have every month. And this particular monthly forecasting forum will focus on the upcoming Neptune station phase in Pisces, as well as Neptune and Mars starting to go direct again, ending their various retrograde phases in November. So that could be really interesting as well, to see how do we move forward with Neptunian issues around spirituality or intuitiveness. How do we move forward with Martian issues around self-identity or things that we want to do or put out there in the world or create. So that could be a really great webinar to watch and to ask questions for if you're interested in that. Now, my members will see me in 2 weeks around the time of the full moon, so we can look at how far we've come since setting our new moon intentions. Everyone else will see me in about 4 weeks from now for the next new moon video. However, feel free to always watch out for additional support videos that I'm creating just for 2020, since there's so much change happening this year and so much pressure and so much intensity this year. I've decided to create these additional support videos. They're very short videos, but feel free to check those out if they're helpful. And, as always, of course, stay healthy, focus on your physical, mental, emotional, and spiritual well-being, and do your best to keep raising your own frequencies through activities and daily routines that support a higher vibrational outcome. This is really important, and each one of us can really do that. So feel free to really look into that for yourself, because that ultimately is what will make your life better and will make the world a better place. All right, so have a good one. It's always a pleasure connecting with all of you. And namaste and have a wonderful super new moon in Libra.